Thank goodness for Jason Bourne. No, really, manufacturing is down, so is construction, but the services sector helps growth power ahead. And film and TV turns out to be a major part of it. Combine that with good news from the Nissan factory in Sunderland, and many of those who campaigned for Brexit are claiming they have been vindicated tonight.
The fact that it secured local people's jobs for the foreseeable future is amazing. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, basically.
So is the future looking bright? Also on News at 10. The jungle in Calais is officially closed, but we found young people still sleeping out rough tonight. The mother of the teenager accused of trying to plant a bomb on the underground shouts out in court that he has Asperger's. The First Ladies who rock. One may soon be president. Most Americans seem to prefer the other. And find out why it's the end of the line for the Vine.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. You may have noticed that every piece of economic news is now fiercely fought over by Brexiteers and Remainers in an attempt to prove who really was right in the referendum campaign. It'd be nice if they stopped that soon, but in the meantime, the Brexiteers today claimed complete vindication. Growth clocked in at a pretty healthy 0.5% for the last quarter, and the Japanese car manufacturer Nissan, which once warned its workers that leaving the EU would be a very bad idea, announced that it was, after all, going to build 2 new models at its plant in Sunderland. So what persuaded the company? Well, the government has owned up to offering some incentives for future expansion, for infrastructure, it said. But is that all Nissan was offered?
At Britain's biggest car factory, as the shifts changed, workers were enjoying the news that their jobs were suddenly a lot safer than they had looked in the aftermath of the EU referendum.
At the back of your mind, there was always the possibility that something bad could happen for the company. But overall, with this decision, the morale of the 7,000 direct staff and the 20,000 indirect staff is phenomenal.
Rather mysteriously, Nissan had just announced that both the next generation Qashqai and the new X-Trail would be built in Sunderland. This despite the firm's stated preference for Britain staying in the EU. The question is, how did the government persuade them to do it?
We've been showing Nissan and others that we are committed to getting the best possible deal from the future relationship that we will be negotiating with the European Union, and we wish to ensure and assure the competitiveness of the British economy.
Now, it's barely 2 weeks since a Qashqai parked up in Downing Street as Nissan's global boss, Carlos Ghosn, met Mrs May. But both the government and Nissan insist there is no special deal, just assurances about the UK's competitiveness.
The UK government has assured us that they will work with all of the automotive industry to make sure that we remain competitive, and we trust the government today as we've trusted them in the past, and they've moved heaven and earth to make sure that they give the assurances to our executive committee. So it's no more complicated than that.
But those who voted leave in Sunderland say they're not surprised.
I never thought for 1 minute that they'd pull out when they're doing so well, but the fact that it secured local people's jobs for the foreseeable future is amazing, and I just think, well, yeah, so put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Labour say it's part of a chaotic Brexit process.
Today we've heard of a deal with Nissan, which I welcome, but does this mean the government is going to do deal by deal, company by company, or area by area? We just don't know.
But the car industry is a big enough sector to have been given some encouragement, producing more than 1.5 million cars last year, directly employing 169,000 workers. There are 8 major manufacturing plants. Most soon face decisions over where to build new models, and the industry makes no bones about its wish list.
It's absolutely critical that we remain part of the single market, that we have access to talent, that we remain part of the customs union, and all the conditions that have made us so successful over recent years and enabled us to have record exports to over 100 countries around the world are secured.
But if Nissan has been told that some of that will be available after Brexit, neither they nor the government are admitting it. Carl Dinnan, News at 10.
As I said just now, the economic news has basically been good today, with growth coming in at exactly the level the Treasury predicted at the start of the year before the prospect of leaving the EU loomed large. But dig a little deeper below a healthy service sector, and just about every other part of the economy, manufacturing and construction, for example, was in decline.
From the fog of Brexit uncertainty, the Chancellor had a clearer idea today of how the economy is faring. In Southampton, he welcomed fresh investment in the city's port, more car exports and better than expected growth, but warned of the future.
The third quarter has shown a resilience in the economy, but we know that the decline of sterling means that we will be seeing some inflationary pressures coming through.
You have an autumn statement coming up. So does this mean this is going to be the spend budget that people were talking about?
Forecasters suggest that next year will be slower, and we should prepare to support the economy.
Once you unpack the numbers behind the headline figure, the story is far from clear-cut.
Today's growth figures were better than many had expected, driven predominantly by growth in services, which went up by 0.8%. The British public has kept calm and carried on spending since the referendum vote. But not all is rosy. In the past 3 months, construction fell by 1.4%. Manufacturing dropped by 1%. These are the biggest falls in these sectors since 2012.
A few miles down the road, Griffon Hoverwork, a hovercraft maker which exports across the world, hasn't yet seen the boost in sales you'd expect from a weaker pound.
If we offered a discount to a customer we were bidding to because there had been a beneficial change in the exchange rate, they would say thank you very much, but it still wouldn't advance their purchase. Potentially it gives us some flexibility when we're negotiating contracts if we get to that point, but we haven't seen the benefit directly ourselves.
Britain's economy, like Jason Bourne, has dodged the Brexit bullet, for now. A summer of blockbusters helped give the box office and the economy a shot in the arm, along with strong retail sales. But many economists believe 2017 will be different.
The rise in inflation should, alongside a slightly softer labour market, should start to weigh on households' real incomes, so households should start to feel the pinch.
Consumers' appetite to spend may well wane, and that would spell trouble for us all.
Well, to make sense of those GDP figures and indeed the Nissan announcement, I'm joined now by Narina and Carl at Westminster. Carl, let's go to you first, if I might. I mean, these incentives, in inverted commas, to Nissan, do we know exactly what they are?
Well, we've got a little bit more of a clue about what's going on tonight, Tom. I've just been speaking to a senior government source who has confirmed that Nissan are in possession of a letter from the government which says that in the event of Brexit, the government will pull out all the stops to support their competitiveness. Now, the key thing for the government is that this is not specific to Nissan. It's not even specific to the automotive industry. So it's not a compensation package. It's not a deal. The government's been saying all day long, there is no deal with Nissan. But there is this letter. Now, what guaranteeing their competitiveness actually means has been left, I think, rather deliberately vague. Certainly no one from Nissan or the government is willing to spell it out today. But it has been enough for Nissan to think it's worth staying.
OK, well, let's come over to Narina, to you. The Brexiteers are saying very clearly that today's news, economic news, broader economic news, vindicates them. Are they correct or not, in your view?
Look, it's too early to call this definitively, especially as all indicators suggest that inflation is going to go up next year, and that would have a real impact on people's cost of living, but also on what people are willing to spend. There's also this prevailing myth at the moment that a weak pound is bound to be good for Britain's exporters, and history teaches us this just isn't necessarily so. The last time the pound fell steeply after the 2008 financial crisis, Britain's exporters barely saw any benefit at all. So the jury is still out, and the reality is that we won't get a clear verdict for some time still to come.
OK, Narina and Carl, for now at least, thank you both very much indeed. And a postscript to our coverage of all things Brexit and economy related for tonight. The Walloons have relented. Yes, they have. If you were watching last Friday night, you will have seen us reporting on how the Parliament of the region of Wallonia, a tiny part of Belgium, was holding up a huge trade deal between Canada and the European Union. Well, apparently, a 4-page amendment to the deal has done the trick, and Canada now has free trade access to the EU, just like that. What can go wrong for us? We'll see. Now, when around 100 children and young people were found sleeping rough last night in Calais, near the site of the partially demolished jungle camp, the French authorities said they'd sort it all out. It shouldn't have happened, they said. But tonight, 70 or so are about to spend a second night in what is left of the camp. We found them bedded down in the ruins of their school.
The camp that was their home burns in the distance as they spend a second night sleeping rough. This time they've been allowed to shelter in the makeshift school that was once part of the so-called jungle. A few huts for around 100 of them. Spirits are low after a long day of uncertainty.
How old are you?
17.
Where are you from?
Afghanistan.
And why are you still here in Calais? Have they offered you any other option?
But we don't want to go back France, any country. We want to go UK.
You only want to go to the UK?
Yeah, Calais.
What are you waiting for?
For UK.
They're tired. Last night they slept in even worse conditions along the roadside. Those who tried to stay in the camp were today arrested. Aid workers who caught it on camera say they were children and have not been seen since. Around 200 more gathered outside with nowhere to go. Some waited for an update. Others cut their losses and headed to the motorway.
Where are you going?
UK.
You're going to the UK?
Yeah, UK.
They've been waiting here for hours now, not sure of exactly what they're waiting for. There was an announcement a few moments ago to say buses are arriving to take them to temporary accommodation in France. But there's a strong belief here that if you're a child, you have the right to go to the UK. These people all say they're minors, and many say they're not getting on buses to take them further away from where they want to go.
The buses never came. After a standoff between migrants and police, they were eventually pushed back and finally allowed here, but only after tireless negotiation from volunteers.
There's been conflicting information from authorities, from police, from CRS. We've been told one thing, one other. We don't know what the options are if we just have been here to help.
So this is the solution for tonight. What you can't see is just how cold it is, and the rooms they'll be sleeping in have no heating, and they have no idea where they'll be this time tomorrow. While returning to the camp is no longer an option, the problem here is far from cleared. Sally Lockwood, News at 10, Calais.
Britain is, of course, committed to taking more of the children of the Calais camp. The Home Secretary Amber Rudd told Julie as much today during a conference on modern-day slavery at the Vatican. A few hundred more would come here, she said. But when Julie asked about the planning and the Home Office email asking charities for help looking after them, the Home Secretary claimed not to have seen it.
A warm welcome at the Vatican today for the Home Secretary meeting police chiefs and church leaders. She brought a strong message on modern slavery, saying the UK is leading the way on the issue.
There are millions of exploited people all around the world, and it is up to us to do everything we can to liberate them.
But there are big questions about her efforts to help vulnerable children prone to traffickers in the Calais camp. I asked her why there the UK had been apparently so slow to act.
I don't accept that the UK has been so slow, as you put it. We've been completely focused on making sure that we do get out the ones who are entitled to come to the UK. We've been aware of the traffickers. You are right, the traffickers are the ones who are the real criminals here, and we're now taking action to make sure that we do help the most vulnerable.
How many more is the UK going to take?
Well, we have a very strict, but I hope generous approach to it, making sure we assess and bring over the ones who really are the most vulnerable, who are under 18, who are better off being in the UK. It will be another few hundred. We probably have about another 2.5 weeks to do that, but we haven't fixed on a number.
So it could be as high as 1,000 children potentially then coming?
It's unlikely to be that high.
There has also been strong criticism over the Home Office's preparations for children arriving in the UK, after an email was leaked from its staff asking charities to provide the support it was struggling to. How on earth could all of this have been left so late?
I don't accept that. The Home Office...
But an email was being sent out from Home Office officials last week.
I haven't seen that email, but actually what's happened is that charities, local authorities, MPs have been incredibly helpful. They've been coming forward and saying, how can we help? And we do need their help. We're not pretending to have all the answers. And the charities have been playing a really important role in making sure that they can reassure the children and work with us.
And what about the current political rhetoric around foreigners coming to Britain?
You've been criticised quite heavily for the language that you used around foreign workers. Would you acknowledge, as you accepted in the conference, that sometimes one has to mind one's language?
I think one always needs to mind one's language, and I always pick my words very carefully.
Thank you very much.
Julie there talking to Home Secretary Amber Rudd. Now, a woman who knows all about life inside the White House made a pitch for votes this evening with 12 days to go to the American election. She was campaigning for the country to choose its first woman president. Her name, of course, Michelle Obama. To some Americans, she might seem a better candidate than the one she was actually campaigning for, Hillary Clinton. But that is a question, arguably, at least for the future. Tonight, the two First Ladies shared a stage for the one and only time in the campaign.
If Hillary wins this election by a small margin, she will be forever grateful to one woman in particular. This election has a rock star, and her name is Michelle Obama. She speaks in deeply personal terms about why this election matters more than any for a generation, using her slogan from the convention, "When they go low, we go high."
Because make no mistake about it, casting our vote is the ultimate way we go high when they go low. Voting is our high. That's how we go high. We vote. How do we go high? How do we go high? That's it.
And with many voters despairing about the negativity of this campaign, she provided a reason why the American dream is still alive.
A country where a biracial kid from Hawaii, the son of a single mother, can make it to the White House. A country where the daughter of an orphan can break that highest and hardest glass ceiling and become president of the United States.
Michelle's role as First Lady and her performances on the campaign trail have led some Democrats to ask, is she the future? Will she herself run for office? That may well be wishful thinking. But she does need Hillary elected to preserve her husband's legacy. And Mrs. Clinton knows the votes of women, many shocked by Donald Trump's language and behaviour, are likely to be pivotal.
But indeed, dignity and respect for women and girls is also on the ballot in this election. And I want to thank our First Lady for her eloquent, powerful defense of that basic value.
Mrs. Clinton is exploiting a four-word blunder from Trump at the last debate.
Replenish the Social
Such a
Security
nasty
Trust Fund.
A phrase that has come to haunt him and mobilise a core constituency for her.
All my friends are here and we are nasty women for Hillary Clinton. We love her.
As thousands poured into the venue for this double act,
Vote for Hillary!
Many were hoping it's Hillary's victory this year
Hillary!
and Michelle's in 4 years' time.
I would vote for her tomorrow if she ran for president, and I think she's very capable and more than qualified.
First Ladies, we rock.
North Carolina is critical. Without it, Donald Trump has almost no path to victory. And Michelle is doing all she can to motivate those undecided voters. Robert Moore, News at 10, Winston-Salem in North Carolina.
Well, back here, it certainly wasn't an entirely routine court case. The mother of a suspected London Underground bomber today shouted out in court that her son has Asperger's syndrome. His lawyer told the hearing Damon Smith was pleading not guilty to making or possessing an explosive substance because his client was only playing a prank. The suspicious device was found on a tube train a week ago.
Arriving at court with the word love on her jumper, Damon Smith's mother watched as her son was accused of making an explosive device. The 19-year-old spotted her as he was brought into court and started waving, smiling and making a thumbs-up gesture. His mother sat in the public gallery and became increasingly distressed as details of the charge were read out. At one stage she stood up and called out, "My son doesn't understand. I'm sorry, but he's got Asperger's," before being persuaded to sit down. It's alleged that Smith got onto a tube at Southwark and left a rucksack in a carriage where 12 passengers were sitting, before getting off at the next station. It caused a major security alert at North Greenwich near the O2 Arena. The prosecutor claimed today the device, which contained ball bearings, was viable. It was defused by bomb disposal officers. Police used CCTV and his travel pass to identify Smith, who was arrested in North London by counter-terrorism officers using a taser, close to the university where he was a student. Mother and son moved to London from Devon 6 months ago. The defence confirmed Damon Smith was autistic and believed this was a prank. Today he was told he must remain in custody until the next court appearance in 3 weeks' time. Juliet Bremner, News at 10.
The memory of this summer's Rio Olympics is still fresh in our minds, of course, but a report into drug testing there has tonight cast a long shadow over the Games. The World Anti-Doping Agency claims there were serious gaps in the testing procedures, and the detail is surprising, even frankly shocking. Nazanin Moshiri has been looking through the report. Nazanin, this has been published in the last hour or so. I mean, maybe we start at the beginning and you could just talk us through the findings.
Yeah, it's quite a hefty report, but there are some key points which I can tell you about. First of all, what we know is up to 50 tests at the Rio Games were aborted. Nearly 100 samples weren't matched to an athlete because of data entry errors. And another key point as well is that there was very little or no in-competition blood testing at many high-risk sports and disciplines, as we know, including weightlifting, which we've seen many bans over. Now, the key really here is that the actual athletes are not being blamed. What's being blamed is the organisation around the Games, which was frankly shambolic. What we saw was that chaperones, people who were supposed to be with the athletes and take them to these tests, and of course these tests, there's very little notice on these tests usually, and they're taken within a few minutes. They could even not find these athletes or had to ask their teammates where they were. So basically they could not get these athletes to these tests on time. Now, clearly, the World Anti-Doping Agency is trying to clean up the sport after the various scandals we've seen with the Russian doping scandal, of course, prior to the Rio Games. But what's preventing it from doing so is the organisation around the testing, and they really need to sort this out.
OK, it certainly doesn't sound very convincing, Nazanin. Thank you very much indeed. And you can find out more about this breaking news story on our website, itv.com/news. It is that time of year again when the nation prepares to honour those killed and injured in conflict. The launch of this year's Poppy Appeal was centred around interactive video screens near St Paul's Cathedral in London. The Royal British Legion display brings together the stories of veterans old and new. And the Queen, who will be leading the country in its Remembrance Sunday tribute, had a slightly less sombre duty today, helping to unveil a statue to her mother. There was the air of a family outing about her trip to the Dorchester suburb of Poundbury, created by Prince Charles, of course. He was there, together with the Duchess of Cornwall and Prince Philip. The statue of the Queen Mother, who Prince Charles called his darling grandmother, towers over the square he has named after her in the centre of the development. Later, the Queen popped into Waitrose to do a spot of shopping, as you do, or browsing at least. Plenty of drivers have had the odd bump and quietly got it fixed, allegedly. But for Simon Davis, test pilot of the next big thing in aviation, the huge hybrid airship known as the Airlander 10, a small mishap was rather more public. Nevertheless, in his first interview since the crash, he was pretty matter-of-fact about it. He told News at 10 sometimes things just don't go according to plan. The plan now is to get it up and flying again as soon as possible, and we got a behind-the-scenes look at those preparations.
When you've crashed a £25 million aircraft, it's a little nerve-wracking getting back behind the controls.
That's probably the best landing I've ever done in this aircraft.
Pilot Simon Davis is in the simulator. He used to fly Tornadoes, but perhaps his biggest test came in August at 5 miles per hour. They were on the Airlander's third test flight and all was going well. But as they came into land, they crashed.
Oh my God, he's actually just broken it.
This is the Airlander now, grounded in a hangar in Bedfordshire while engineers do constant checks. That includes testing the air pressure inside, which means being sucked up into the helium balloon. Simon says the accident happened because they tried a steeper descent after realising a rope was hanging dangerously towards the ground. What was it like being in that cockpit when you crashed?
It was pretty uncomfortable because we knew we were about to damage the aircraft, but the speeds involved were quite low. It was immediately apparent that everybody was fine, although we damaged the aircraft, and David and I, the other pilot, both walked away without scratch.
Were you scared?
Yeah, it was a little alarming, but again, you accept that this is flight test. Things sometimes don't go according to plan, and you dust yourself off and try again.
The cockpit was effectively destroyed. They've had to remove it and are now working to repair it under that green tent behind me. They say the Airlander should be flying again by early next year. It won't improve Airship's reputation as unwieldy and unsafe. Quite a challenge for hybrid air vehicles who want to make and sell 6 of these a year by 2019. Is it safe?
Yeah, it's perfectly safe. So we had an incident and people walked away and had a full day of work thereafter. It's a very benign aircraft. It's not full of hydrogen, it's full of helium, which from chemistry at school we'll remember is inert, it doesn't burn.
A slightly steep glide path now, about 5 degrees.
It's a tricky business being a pioneer, especially when you're carrying the hopes of an industry and its future. Olivia Kinsley, News at 10.
And finally, even if you've never watched one of the 6-second video clips known as a Vine, you might recognise some of the images that have bounced around the internet since the system of sending them began 4 years ago. If you still haven't sent one, you are running out of time, I'm afraid. Twitter, which runs the video sharing system, says it will pull the plug soon. Whether it was Ed Miliband and George Michael, Music make you lose Jeremy Corbyn dancing, or David Cameron checking himself out, the Vine has caught them all. That's Paddy Ashton, by the way. The 6-second clips have been a comic's dream.
Oh wow, it's a man shellfish. Never seen one in the wild before.
But no more. It was founded in 2012 and bought immediately by Twitter before it even launched. By the end of last year, it had 200 million monthly users. But now Twitter plans to integrate more and more video onto its main site.
Really, it was never thought to be a big moneymaker for Twitter. Other platforms such as Snapchat, Instagram stories have become a lot more popular. They've managed to innovate a lot further than Vine, so the original Vine users have tended to move over to those platforms.
So animal lovers and would-be comedians will have to look elsewhere. Watch some of those over and over again. And I guess people have. If that's piqued your interest, you can watch the most memorable Vines of all time on our website, and it certainly makes for some viewing. So let's just finally take a look at what is coming up tomorrow. Drivers working for the Uber minicab company will find out whether they will be treated as employees and given full-time workers' rights like holiday pay. We'll be looking in detail at the votes already cast for Hillary Clinton in the American presidential election and whether she is doing well enough to make it to the White House. And with winter not so far away, there will be advice from the government and insurance companies on how to protect homes from flooding. Raggy will be here tomorrow for all that and very much more. But from me, for now, good night and thank you very much indeed for watching.